So hello everyone and welcome to our August Journal Club. I'm really excited for our discussion today, taking the usual Ask Me Anything format with Timo Minssen and Sara Gerke. This is a really terrific publication, so congratulations to you both and to Ariel for getting this out into the world. Also, the topic is really important and timely, so I'm grateful to you both for joining us today and look forward to learning a lot both from you and the tremendous questions we get from our members dialing in. I'm going to start briefly just with some housekeeping for folks who may not have attended one of our journal clubs before. So just, I always try and notify folks, these questions or these conversations are often incredibly rich. And so we do make a point of posting the recordings to the website after the session. So just so everyone's aware, the session is being recorded. Our run of show for today, Sara and Timo, you are going to sort of briefly give us the high points and the sort of the behind the scenes glance at the tremendous paper, provide a little bit of background for our discussion, and then we'll open it up and spend the majority of our time today in an open discussion format. So for attendees dialing in, what I'll do is I'll leave you on mute during Sara and Timo's presentation. Then I'll allow everyone to talk. And if you have a question, you can type it into the Q&A box, into the chat function, or you can raise your hand. I'll moderate that conversation, but we do try and keep it very free flowing. And oftentimes we have some great energy for these discussions. So with that, I will hand over Sara and Timo to you. Thank you again for being here, and just tell me when you need me to advance the slides.
Yes, many thanks. So I will start with introducing here our paper before I give the floor to my dear colleague Sara here. So my name is Timo Minssen. I'm a professor of law originally from Germany. I live in Sweden, work in Denmark, and I'm leading and I'm the director of the Center for Advanced Studies in Biomedical Innovation Law in Copenhagen. It's called CeBIL, and Sara is part of the collaboration that we have within the framework of the center and the larger grant. So many thanks, Michelle. First of all, I would like to say a big thank you for your interest in our paper and for organizing this webinar in these truly challenging but also interesting times. Second, I would like to make two disclosures. The first is that I'm not only a law professor, but since recently also a part-time senior consultant at Ex Officio, which is a Swedish consulting firm that provides advice to large research infrastructures and tech companies and their research and business partners. The second disclosure that I wanted to make is that it's still holidays. It's still holidays in Sweden where I am right now, and it is very warm. So what you see is just half the story, since I'm actually sitting here in shorts that you cannot see, and I hope that is all right. But I have a suit here on the upper part. But let's go straight to the in medias res now, and let me start by highlighting the importance of today's topic. That is Germany's recent digital health reforms in the COVID-19 era, and what other countries, including the US, could perhaps learn from it. A recent survey, and I think this already highlights really the importance of this topic, conducted by the US law firm Ropes & Gray, involved 284 healthcare, life science, and digital health professionals in the US. And that study is from last year, late last year. It revealed that 42% of respondents felt they were likely or somewhat likely to partner or contract with an AI company over the next year. Yet a significant share of the respondents also believe that digital health partnerships face unique obstacles with regard to key issues such as pricing and reimbursement and data privacy and security. And consequently, they were reluctant to collaborate with digital health companies for a variety of reasons. Of note was the fact that 60% of the respondents believe that strongly entrenched business and reimbursement models make it difficult to bring digital health products to the market. And they also highlighted and stressed that reimbursement is one of the key challenges for many new digital health solutions. So the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic now really has once again emphasized and highlighted the importance of digital health technologies. and also the particular importance of telehealth services that would help us to decrease the contacts in healthcare. But also, of course, tracing apps and warning apps and so on. And Germany has, despite many differences and peculiarities that we find in Germany vis-a-vis the US and other countries, it has, like the US, a multi-payer healthcare system with over 100 independent insurers. And this makes the recent German developments an especially interesting case to compare with the US situation. This is what we will do today. And what happened now is that on November 7th, 2019, the German Parliament, the Bundestag, adopted the Digital Healthcare Act, das Digitale Versorgungsgesetz. We call it DVG now in this presentation. And it was subsequently approved by the Federal Council, the Bundesrat, and signed into law by the German president late last year. In addition to promoting the use of telehealth and ensuring better usability of health data for research purposes, the new law entitles all individuals covered by statutory health insurance to benefits for certain digital health applications. And while many consider this new DVG, this new law, to be a breakthrough in incentivizing advancing patients' diagnosis, management, and treatment with digital health tools, the new law has also attracted criticism and faces a number of challenges moving forward. And this is what we will talk about today. So against this background, my dear colleague Sara here will now first provide an overview of the new German DVG and outline the landscape for reimbursement of digital health solutions in the US, including recent changes to policies governing telehealth during the COVID-19 pandemic. We then move to the discussion of some challenges raised by the DVG, and lastly, we highlight early lessons and opportunities for other countries. So I will now give the floor to Sara, who will give us a quick overview on the new German law. Maybe you could also present yourself very quickly, Sara.
Thank you, Timo. So perhaps I will just start quickly in presenting myself. So I'm Sara Gerke, and I'm currently the research fellow in medicine, artificial intelligence, and law at the Petri Flom Center for Health Law Policy, Biotechnology, and Bioethics at Harvard Law School. And we are collaborating closely with CeBIL, with Timo and his team together on a project which is called PMail, and that's on precision medicine, artificial intelligence, and law. And we are looking at a lot on really different topics, from ethics to the law of AI in healthcare, but also digital health. And that's why we came up to write this paper together also with Ariel Stern, which I would like to also mention here. So it's a collaboration between the three of us. And so I now would like to really going to try to give you an overview of the criteria and assessment process for digital health application under the Digital Healthcare Act, which Timo mentioned. So this Digital Healthcare Act came into effect on 19th of December 2019, so it's a really very new act, and it primarily makes amendments to the Social Security Code 5, which regulates statutory health insurance. And so approximately 90% of the population in Germany, which is roughly 75 million people, are covered by statutory state-funded health insurance. While the remaining 10% are privately insured. And so the Digital Healthcare Act entitles those insured by one of the German's independent statutory health insurance providers, which are over 100 independent insurers, to coverage benefits for certain digital health applications. And so this means that insurers will be required to pay for qualifying applications and making such digital health solutions broadly accessible. And as you can see here in this figure, insured persons are entitled to coverage benefits for digital health applications if such applications meet 5 criteria. The first is that they are lower risk medical devices, so either class 1 or class 2A devices. And then their main function is essentially based on digital technologies. And then the third criterion is that they are intended to support the monitoring, detection, relief, or treatment of illnesses, or the compensation, detection, relief, or treatment of injuries or disabilities in the case of injured persons, or in the care provided by service providers. And then the fourth criterion is that they have been included in the newly established official register for digital health applications maintained by the German Federal Institute for Drugs and Medical Devices, which is also called BfArM. It's an abbreviated form. And so the fifth criterion is that they are used either with the approval of the health insurer or with the prescription of the treating physician or psychotherapist. The fourth criterion here is particularly interesting. So how does an application be included in the newly established register by the BfArM? So at the request of the manufacturer, the BfArM will assess whether manufacturer has provided that their digital health application fills the following requirements: that safety, functionality, quality of the medical device, data protection, state-of-art data security, and positive effects on care. And so the BfArM will make a decision regarding the manufacturer's request within 3 months of receiving complete application documents. And the first applications have already been made, and the BfArM expects that the first digital health applications will be included in the register at the end of August. And so if the manufacturer satisfies all requirements except the last one, which is the positive effects on care, the digital health application can be included in the register for a preliminary testing period of 12 months, during which the manufacturer must provide evidence of its effects on care. And the explanatory memorandum of the Act clarifies that such effects constitutes one of two things. So first, a medical benefit, that is a therapeutic improvement by positively influencing patient-relevant endpoints, such as quality of life. Or second, procedural and structural improvements to healthcare. And that's the promotion of patient information and patient sovereignty, better coordination of care process, etc. And so the memorandum also clarifies that the medical benefit can be demonstrated via expert opinions, case reports, application observations, studies, or other valid findings. And so if the manufacturer does not manage to provide sufficient evidence within the first year, the BfArM can extend the deadline for another 12 months if there is a high likelihood of later verification. And once the digital health application is included in the register, the National Association of Statutory Health Insurance Funds, which is the GKV Spitzenverband, begins the process of negotiating a standardized reimbursement price with the manufacturer. And so this price then applies to all statutory health insurers 12 months after the entry of a digital health application into the register. And during the first year, the manufacturer's list price applies. But in the case that the manufacturer and the GKV Spitzenverband cannot agree on a negotiated price within 1 year, an arbitration board will set the reimbursement price within 3 months. And in the event that the manufacturer makes significant changes to a digital health application that is included in the register, it must notify the BfArM immediately. And then the BfArM decides within 3 months, again, very short timing, after the notification whether the application should be removed from the register or whether the register should be adjusted to reflect the updated product features. And what's also very important to know is that if significant changes are not reported, a penalty of up to 100,000 euros can be imposed. And there's also a digital health application ordinance that lays out details for inclusion of digital health application in the register, and also the BfArM published guidelines for manufacturers that interpret this ordinance and provide supplementary details on the procedure for inclusion in the register. There are two other goals of the Digital Healthcare Act that I would like to highlight. So the first is the usability of data research purposes, and the second is promoting telehealth. So the first, the Digital Healthcare Act allows certain beneficiaries, such as universities and publicly funded research institutions, to process certain demographic data from health insurers for specific purposes, such as for analysis of treatment or care processes. And such data may include information on patient gender, place of residence, age, vital status, date of death, etc. And if researchers can clearly explain the suitability and necessity of the scope and structure of the requested data, a responsible research data center will then transmit the data to them in an anonymized and aggregated form. Under certain conditions, it's also possible that it will be provided in pseudonymized form, which is similar to de-identified, not quietly, but to de-identified data under HIPAA. And researchers may only use such data for agreed upon purposes, and the data can typically not be passed on to third parties. The second thing is that under the Digital Healthcare Act, patients can more easily take advantage of video consultations. So during such a consultation, a patient can be informed about circumstances that are essential for consent to a medical measure, including its nature, scope, etc., and consequences. And previously that was not possible. So it always had to follow a consultation in the physician's office before you could do a video consultation. And physicians in Germany can now also advertise video consultations as long as proper treatment and advice are possible through this medium. And it is also worth mentioning that the use and value of telehealth tools such as video consultations have really grown during the COVID-19 pandemic, and regulatory limitations were lifted, and doctors can now use video consultation flexibly in all therapeutically relevant cases. And psychotherapists are limited to video consultation for certain services, and may only practice telehealth following an in-person consultation involving an initial diagnosis. But previously, only every fifth patient, so that was before COVID-19, could be treated by a doctor or a psychotherapist via video consultation, and such consultations were limited to 20% of total services provided. And this topic brings me to the US. When it comes to the reimbursement of digital health tools. Next slide, please. In the US, I would like to highlight two things. So first, Germany, like the US, has a multi-payer system, and thus the US should watch the developments in Germany closely and really learn from its experience. And second, there is an increase, really a boom in telehealth services during the COVID-19 pandemic. And initially, there were few formal large-scale mechanisms for the reimbursement of digital health solutions in the US. However, recent developments, including COVID-19, have really led to increased coverage of other digitally provided services, such as telehealth. And a key player in the US healthcare system is the federal Medicare program, which provides insurance coverage for over 60 million Americans. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, Medicare has meaningfully expanded its telehealth coverage policies. So for example, all Medicare beneficiaries can now receive telehealth services provided by clinicians, regardless of whether they are new or established patients and where they are located. And healthcare providers have also been given the option to waive co-payments for such services for beneficiaries of Medicare Part B, which is the outpatient medical insurance. And moreover, a wide range of practitioners can now offer telehealth services to patients. And these include speech-language pathologists, occupational therapists, and physical therapists. And most significantly, Medicare announced that healthcare providers can now bill for a telehealth visit at the same rate as if the visit had been in person. And some private insurers have also introduced payment parity for telehealth. However, changes to telehealth coverage policies will only formally extend through the COVID-19 pandemic, and as such, we need new post-COVID-19 models of care delivery and reimbursement. We will need to develop them that maintain the broad use of telehealth services where efficient, but also to avoid overpayment through typically shorter telehealth compared to in-person visits. And on this front, there is also a very new development. So Trump signed in early August a new executive order to further expand to telehealth services during the COVID-19 pandemic, especially in rural communities. And the president also is taking action to extend the availability of certain telehealth services after the current public health emergency ends. And so telehealth is really right now an exciting area, and we need to watch this space closely in the next months or so what Trump's next action will be. Both national coverage rules, such as those created by Germany's Digital Healthcare Act, as well as the increased use of value-based reimbursement approaches, such as, for example, bundled payments, can stimulate uptake of digital health solutions. So in contrast to fee-for-service reimbursement, bundled payments involve a single price for all care required to treat a particular medical condition of a patient. And in cases where a bundle is used, any tools that have the potential to reduce overall costs of care, such as through reduced hospital readmissions, will become attractive for healthcare providers, and even if they increase some input costs. And however, combining both new reimbursement approaches and national coverage rules would go even further to stimulate the development and adoption of innovative, beneficial digital health solutions. Although both approaches encourage the use of proven solutions, not all medically beneficial solutions will be promoted via value-based payment models. Only the subset of offerings that drive down overall condition related to care costs. And so it's very important that we have national coverage rules, such as those laid out in the German Digital Healthcare Act, to go a step further to ensure that other evidence-based digital health solutions will have a clear path to reimbursement in the formal healthcare delivery system. And Timo will now take over and tell you a little bit more about the challenges we still face with the Digital Healthcare Act.
Yes, next slide, please, Jennifer. Thank you. So you can imagine that the new German law has been welcomed by many, in particular by developers of these digital health solutions in Germany, but it also faces a variety of challenges and unresolved questions. One criticism is the limited scope of the DVG, since the Act only applies to lower risk medical devices. So consequently, many potentially valuable digital health applications are therefore not covered by the provisions of the DVG. First, for example, non-medical devices fall a priori outside of the DVG. As we all know, a lot of these definitions of what a medical device is under the European MDR, the Medical Device Regulation, depend on the intended use of the application. Second, digital health applications that are categorized as a Class 2B or Class 3 device are also, so the high-risk devices, are also not covered by the Act. For example, certain clinical decision support software under the MDR, which may have a serious and important health impact, with MDR I mean Medical Device Regulation, will fall outside of the scope of the DVG. Moreover, under the new MDR, software that influences the use of a device or drives a device falls within the same class as the device itself. Thus, for example, a software app that drives an implantable device or an ingestible electronic like a pacemaker would be classified as a high-risk device and would thus automatically fall outside of the scope of the DVG. Third, the DVG does not apply to those Class 1 and Class 2A devices that fail to fulfill some of the requirements that Sara had mentioned before, such as those whose main function is not essentially based on digital technologies. A second challenge for manufacturers is to be included in the register for reimbursable digital health applications. So manufacturers face several hurdles in pursuing inclusion in the newly established register for the reimbursable digital health applications maintained by the Federal Institute for Drugs and Medical Devices. In particular, I think the satisfaction of the last requirement, that is the demonstration of positive effects on care, will certainly create a variety of challenges. At launch, many manufacturers will likely not be able to demonstrate sufficient evidence of the efficacy of their applications. Although an application can be included in the register for an initial testing period of 12 months, manufacturers need to submit a plausible justification for the likely contribution of their application to improving care. That is, they need to at least disclose the results of a systematic data analysis for the use of the application. and a scientific evaluation concept for the demonstration of positive effects on care created by an independent institution. Further positive effects on care can only be demonstrated in the course of the testing period by showing medical benefit or patient-relevant procedural and structural improvements to care delivery. And luckily, we have now new guidelines, which very recently have also been published in English, and they regulate the details of such a demonstration. In particular, a comparative study must be carried out, usually in Germany, showing better outcomes versus without the relevant digital health application. Another challenge that I want to highlight is the negotiation of prices. The question of how to calculate and agree upon negotiated prices after the first 12 months of listing in the register that is run by this German institute may also pose challenges. Much will depend on negotiations between the National Association of Statutory Health Insurance Funds and the manufacturer of digital health application. And the parties need to agree on a standardized reimbursement price that will apply to all statutory health insurers. The DVG's requirement to include outcome-related components as a subject of price agreements will likely raise additional challenges. And moreover, from what we can see right now, the process appears to be rather non-transparent, since negotiations are held behind closed doors and minutes and advisory documents are confidential. And as we all know, there is a lot of debate now about prices in medical care, in pharmaceuticals, and there's a big call for more transparency. So it's a little bit, we will have to see how this, aligns with these kind of developments that we see right now. And it is therefore also particularly important for the success of the DVG to ensure the quality and efficacy of the procedural setup and the usability of tools that support these complex and confidential negotiations. Furthermore, although the manufacturer retains the right to charge a higher selling price than the negotiated price, the difference would need to be paid by the insured individual. But although they have this higher selling price, manufacturers will likely stick to the negotiated prices in order to maximize demand for their products. And there's the risk of penalty payments. As Sara had already mentioned in her presentation, they are pretty substantial, 100,000 euros if you fail to notify the Bundesinstitut immediately about significant changes to the digital health application. Although this institute can only set this penalty payment after first having given the manufacturer deadline for notification, which is usually not more than 4 weeks. And second, the manufacturer also needs to miss this deadline. But the financial consequences for manufacturers, especially the SMEs, the small, medium-sized companies, could really be fatal. And the newly published guidelines, they contain some examples of what is meant by significant changes, for instance. And for instance, there could be a change in the location of the data storage, for example. That would, of course, trigger certain other regulations. So that is considered to be a substantial change. And the Bundesinstitut guidelines also provides a case report form on its website to help manufacturers to assess whether a change to digital health application is significant under the new rules. So this is all downloadable from the webpage. And also the Bundesinstitut, this federal institute, also offers advice on any questions that the manufacturers may have. Then there is, of course, the privacy issue. Of course, we cannot, disclose the changes without talking about the GDPR issues. So many patient advocates have raised the criticism that the DVG does not enable patients to opt out of sharing the demographic data collected by health insurers for research purposes. There are some safety safeguards in the legislation that should help to prevent breaches of privacy. But we all know with the new methods of data fusion, data triangulation, as soon as patients use a cell phone, there's always the risk of patients being re-identified. So when processing requested data under the DVG, the beneficiary has to make sure that no connection is made to service providers or people. And the Act also acknowledges that such connection may inadvertently be established, and there are some cases that can be mentioned, for example, A university could potentially re-identify an employee by accidentally combining requested data for research purposes under the DVG with information that is easily available from medical certificates regarding sick days, for example, and that could then lead to the revelation of sensitive information about an employee's health status. So that is why we see some safeguards, and for example, the responsive research data center must assess such risks in relation to the data requested by the beneficiary and take appropriate measures to minimize it while adequately preserving the intended scientific benefit. So again, we have a lot of challenges with regard to procedural safeguards and also privacy and ethics by design of the employed technology. So what are then the lessons for other countries? Let's get then to the conclusions. The last point. So what we have to have in mind is that among the OECD countries, Germany's DFG represents a first of its kind opportunity for large-scale reimbursement of evidence-based digital health applications. Although Germany is one of the world's biggest healthcare markets with an annual spending of around 374 billion euros, it has historically had a pretty low level of digitalization among the developed countries. So the new DVG and its reimbursement standards for digital health applications really represent an important step in not only modernizing the German healthcare delivery system, but also improving the quality of care for patients. And it will also help us to be better prepared for future pandemics. So this cannot be highlighted enough in these challenging times. So we better do what we can to support and push the technical development in a constructive way, while at the same time remaining aware and being careful of the remaining challenges and unresolved questions, ranging from the limited scope to data privacy to hurdles for manufacturers, all the challenges that I mentioned. So these remaining issues actually may temper some digital health application manufacturers and developers' enthusiasm when they consider the German market. But I think it's also important for product adoption to be fully accepted by patients, payers, and providers. It will really be absolutely crucial that outstanding procedural issues are addressed thoughtfully and as transparently as possible. And we all know that this will really be vital for product adoption and social acceptance of the new technology. So we have to be very careful. This said, I think it's also important to have in mind that there are over 318,000 mobile health apps available, and around 200 apps are being added to app stores each and every day. So to ensure patient and consumer privacy and safety, it is important that health apps are assessed based on criteria such as safety, functionality, quality, data protection, data security, and positive effects on care. And that means that all stakeholders, physicians, associations, patient organizations, politicians, and so on, should really collaborate closely to unleash the full potential of this innovative health system centered around patient outcomes and patient sovereignty. We believe that a risk-based approach can serve as a useful starting point for policymakers in the development of standardized evidence-based assessment processes and legal requirements for digital health solutions. We will also have to think carefully about the persisting need for human involvement, oversight, and stewardship, and in particular with regard to the doctor-patient relationship. Again, this is a very crucial aspect if you think about product adoption and social acceptance. But that said, policymakers will also need to make sure that they do not over-regulate the sector. That is also really important, because when you join these tech parties where all the developers meet, we always feel like party pupils, we lawyers, right? So it's important also to really be constructive and to be helpful and to solve problems instead of just seeing new problems and creating new problems. So it should not become overly burdensome for manufacturers to meet the requirements for qualifying their products for reimbursement, thus preventing or slowing innovation in this much needed area where innovation is really needed. And as other countries and health systems look to implement coverage policies and assessment processes for digital health solutions, further developments and resolution of questions about the DVG will certainly provide valuable insights, and these discussions are now really taking speed and picking up speed in Germany. From the perspective of manufacturers, it is of course clear that well-articulated evidence standards and straightforward assessment processes will help to stimulate the entry of new products. And in particular, the new guidelines, I think they really establish some more clarity and give us some really much needed guidance. I think to really push the area in this raging epidemic, there may also be the option to introduce additional incentives, such as reduce insurance fees and so on. And as other countries' health insurance systems grapple with the same questions of how and when to reimburse for digital health solutions, I think policymakers should really carefully monitor how Germany's DVG is implemented in practice and use the German experience to draw their own lessons and implement them in their particular circumstances, situations, and also make use of the opportunities that can be gained from this process. And of course, to avoid the potential mistakes that we do in Germany. Right? So that said, it is really so exciting now to see that we are rolling and that the first applications are now or have already been submitted under the DVG's fast track process procedure. And I can see that on LinkedIn every week. So there are new applications now being submitted. So the world is watching, and it's so exciting to see this happening now. So this is all I want to say for now. So I think now we have to open the stage for questions. Sorry that we went a little bit over the time. Thank you.
No apologies at all, Sara and Timo. I've been grappling, trying to, really wrap my head around sort of the DVG and all its sort of complexities and implications. And your manuscript in this presentation today has helped me more than anything else. I was excited when they put some more English translation out recently, and I will admit it didn't help me much. So I am very grateful for you. For folks on the line, I have gone ahead and given everyone the ability to talk. So please feel free to raise your hand and I'll call on you, or type your questions into the chat or the Q&A. I might try and take advantage of while everyone sort of gets their questions organized, to ask a question of my own if I can. Sara, you were talking about sort of the need for digital sort of manufacturers to notify the relevant authorities if there were significant changes, and I wondered if you could define that for me, and I'll give you a little bit of background on why I'm interested in the answer. One of the things we've seen here in the US is sometimes medical device manufacturers, specifically those that sort of produce connected technologies, have been reticent to do software upgrades even when a vulnerability has been discovered, because there has been a sort of misinterpretation that would be a change that would have regulatory implications. And CDRH has actually had to do quite an aggressive campaign to educate the medical device community for connected technologies that is not the case, that if there is a risk or a vulnerability, you absolutely should do the software update. I'm also inclined to think that in this sort of digital era of health, I'm banging a drum that, patient safety is different now than it was before. Timo, you highlighted things like privacy considerations. And I'm curious to hear what those sort of significant changes have been classified as and put them into context for what we know already.
Yeah, I think that's a very good question. You really found the piece which I think is most interesting to look at and watch at, because it's so important, especially also when you look at AI, digital health, etc. You need to update these products, and when do you actually have a significant change? And I cannot give you right now the perfect answer, because I think that's also something we still need to figure out. So I personally would say, of course, if it's just like the layout, the design, probably not. But what is with like deeper questions? If you are changing the algorithm, do you need to go back? I mean, the good thing is in the US, at least the FDA, when it comes to 510K, if there are significant changes and you need to get a new 510K, there are some guidance, but still through all the digital health solutions this field is so quickly developing, I think we really need to think about what a significant change actually means. And if you have a significant change, you usually want to have some kind of oversight, and that's also, it's not only in the clinical space, but also when it comes to researching apps. Do you need a new approval by the IRB, etc., etc.? So there are so many layers of it, and I think this is really something which will be very interesting to look at, what the Germans are doing in that field, and how there are like some couple of examples. Timo mentioned one, but I think they really we will really see what they really actually when they come up with a more precise list, perhaps in the future, what they actually see, what a significant change is. And then I think that's something where one can really look and learn for other digital health solutions in the US too.
Right. Can I just add to that, Sarah, what we see is also that we in Europe, we do not have something like the Sentinel system, for example, in the US, right? We have still very nationally regulated health system. EMA has not the same tools right now to take care of this update problem. And, I mean, you want to hit the clay dove or shoot the clay dove when it's in the air, right? Not when it's in the catapult. And, the question then also, when does the dove become a different bird, right? So, and we need tools for that. And this is one of the great challenges in the future, I would say. I don't know if you agree, Sarah.
And just reacting to what you both said, actually, it's made my mind go a bit further. I think often about the need for sort of harmonizations in these things. And, I actually think those of us outside of Germany are quite lucky that Germany sort of taking the plunge, and we can watch and we can learn, and there's an opportunity for harmonization there. I'm thinking, about the definition of things like a significant change. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we could have some level of harmonization across regulatory and payer regions? But Sarah, I hadn't thought about the fact that, and then harmonization in the research context, right? So that also jives with what an IRB would define as a significant change, so that we aren't having these new organizations, these sort of manufacturers and developers of these tools having to have sort of juggle 7 different definitions of that trigger a variety of actions. So that's, it's definitely food for thought, and sort of underscores, I think, that need for a common definition and harmonization of what a change means. Rachel, I see that you've asked a question in the chat. Would you like to unmute yourself and ask your question to Sara and Timo directly?
Sure, Jen. Hey, Sara. Hey, Timo. This is Rachel Chassie, Director of Innovation at Dime. Thanks so much for the fantastic presentation, and I'm really enjoying learning the hard work that Germany has already done. Thank you for that, and hopefully the rest of the world can really learn from this great work. So I'm really interested when you both were talking about the bee farm. Now, first of all, I think one of the things that struck me the most was the fact that applications can be reviewed in 3 months, which for anything to be reviewed by the government in 3 months sounds like a dreamland, so congratulations. But since it looks like it's been available for a while now, I'm wondering what kind of learnings has come out from that. And if there's anything that you both would think about to maybe kind of add to the bee farm, and that would potentially make it more useful for development teams.
Sure. So thanks, Rachel, for the question. So although the act it came into effect last year, end of last year, it just still has just started. Yeah. So they just open up that you can actually, so they needed to establish first, the BFARM still had to establish the register, and so it's just right now that since last month that they can like apply to the BFARM. So right now there's not a single digital health application yet in the register, but they expect that this will happen end of the month, and I think that's why we should really closely watch what's happening in the next 6 months and longer to see what kind of application they will approve and how the process will go, and especially like in 1 year, because I guess my assumption is that most digital health application will not be possible. It will not be possible that they can already show the care effect, and so probably it will be interesting to see again after this testing period, after the 1 year of being in the register, if they will be able still to stay in the register or whether they will be deleted and removed.
Yes, Sarah, I think some of the first applications have now been submitted, and you can follow that on LinkedIn, for example. So I just posted in the chat room the LinkedIn post talking about the application and the fast track procedure. But they just have received the letter from the Bundesinstitut that the application has been not accepted, but has been basically is being considered now. So we don't, as Sara correctly pointed out, we don't have any results now about how effective the system really is.
Yeah, I just know that they really got a lot of applications and questions, and it's like very positive. They got a very positive feedback of all the manufacturers so far, and I think they have already over 20 applications and like over 50 people who asked. So it's like really so far they are quite happy about the feedback of the system. Although I wonder what happens, my personal view, because right now I think one needs to, I go a little bit in more complicated things, is what Timo also mentioned, you know, you need to have a medical device. Right now, so originally it was thought that you have to have a medical device under the MDR, which is a medical device regulation. But the medical device regulation, this is like a new regulation in the EU, which was supposed to start in May, but because of COVID-19, the European Commission and Parliament, they postponed the start date for next year because they were afraid otherwise that there will be a shortage of medical devices. And so right now you can apply, so the manufacturer can apply with a product which is already CE marked under the MDD. And they need to, in the next year, when then the medical device regulation will come into effect, they will need to get new approvals, authorizations for their devices. So I'm not sure how they will do this transformation to then having in the register the new device, because the device needs to have then needs to be getting a new, from the notified bodies, a new authorization, every device under the MDR, and that I think will be a next challenge. And I have no clue how they will actually now, because originally the idea was to have them already getting into the register as a medical device under the MDR and not the medical device, the old medical device directive. And so now I think this will be a challenge, this transformation of regulation, because the register has already been started now.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. This was a very important point that you made, Sara. And I think the BfArM also is really having a big challenge in hiring the right personnel, right? Because you need really folks that do not only have a technical or an AI understanding, they also need to have an understanding how products develop throughout the life cycle of products. So this will be a big challenge, and we face the same in Denmark, which is also approaching a few very interesting approaches. And then we don't know where the new challenges come up with regards, for example, the rights of vulnerable populations, you know, and how far the assessment will become more complicated based on these new kind of insights and rights that might develop.
And like Jennifer already said, that although it's not translated in English, probably it did not help you too much, because it's like really complicated. And as I said, you know, you have the act, and you have the ordinance, you have the guidelines from the BfArM, and these guidelines and ordinances, they are like hundreds of pages long, you know, so it's like really quite a complicated system too, and still a lot which needs to be figured out. But I think that they started this process in the first place is a very great, personally I think it's a very great thing, because there are so many apps, too many apps right now on the market, and I think to have somehow some quality assessments seems to me very valuable.
Absolutely. One of the things I worry about is sort of the proliferation of apps, especially those here in the US that fall under that sort of health and wellness. It makes me nervous, especially about some of the considerations that you guys were talking about in terms of, you know, data security and whether any claims being made have any evidence whatsoever to sort of bear them out. So, you know, it's a really strong and positive signal. I agree. I'm keeping a close eye on questions. I'm going to take the opportunity. I was thinking a little bit about a rapidly expanding sort of class of organizations we're seeing over here in the US. Sara, you talked about the two goals of the DVG, talking specifically about these sort of digital health technologies themselves, but then also goals around telehealth. And so here we're seeing the emergence of what I would describe as sort of virtual first care organizations, often in a really tight vertical, where they combine some digital health applications with clinical expertise provided virtually around a specific condition. It might be sort of skincare, it might be sort of GI issues, it might be mental health. And all of that happens without being attached to a more traditional healthcare organization. I was wondering if you guys are seeing the same sort of emergence of organizations like that in Germany and other places in Europe, and if so, how the DVG sort of impacts their evolution.
That's a good question. I don't think that you can, but let's ask Timo too. But I don't think that this you can really see in the German system. Timo, what is your thoughts about that?
I'm not aware of it, but again, this is a very new development, so we might see this appearing in the near future, right? Yeah, so yeah, I also wonder, I mean, there's also a lot of talk about, you know, standards that would be basically user-generated law, that create user-generated law, that you have kind of standards that are developed in certain sectors of these app technologies, for example, which, for example, could lead to rules that are parliamentary law rules. For example, with regard to bias discrimination, you talked about, you know, skin apps, you know, which might work differently on black skin than on white skin, and all these things. So I think there is a need to quickly establish guidelines where the laws might be too slow. And there will be a lot of, you know, industry self-regulation in the industry that will develop, and that will also become a part of the marketing of the products. That's what I assume. But maybe that leaves a little bit the focus now of what the question was about.
No, Sara and Timo, they were very, very useful remarks, and it is interesting, and you're dead right, that has been emerging sort of very, very quickly here in the US, although, you know, unfortunately, I think here in the US, we have even more challenges than most healthcare systems that leave opportunities for innovation. We have time for one more question, and David, I can see that you've popped a question into the Q&A. Would you like to, you should be able to unmute yourself if you're able and ask your question directly to Sara and Timo.
Yeah, thank you, Jen. Thank you, Sara, and thank you, Timo, for sharing your knowledge and your time here. As a practicing physical therapist in the States here, I'm curious whether or not physiotherapists in Germany were included in the Digital Healthcare Act to deliver and bill for their virtual services on the same level or parity with their physical visits.
So I think yes, I think they were also included, but for the psychotherapists, they did like some limitations, but I think they were included.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yeah, but again, I mean, we should have this session one more time after a year or two or so, and then we can, you know, write a follow-up paper and see, you know, where the shoe is really pressing, as we say in Germany. Wo der Schuh drückt, where the problems are really appearing, and which of the problems are really becoming relevant, because what we academics do is not always, you know, practically relevant. We just, you know, make predictions from our ivory tower, but we now have to sense what is really in the real world becoming an issue.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think it would be interesting to compare that to what's happening in the US here as well. So thank you both again.
Fantastic. Rachel and David, thank you for your excellent questions. Sara and Timo, this was absolutely fantastic. As I said, this is a complex and challenging bit of legislation to sort of wrap our heads around. I think I speak for everyone on the line when I say your paper is fantastic. The conversation today was incredibly informative. You fielded all of our tough questions. So thank you for being here. I'm going to run through very quickly a couple of upcoming events in our sort of DIME pipeline, and then we'll close out. So our next journal club is going to be hosted by Elena Ismailova and Ben Vandendriech. They've just published their manuscript in Clinical and Translational Science about leveraging the lab biomarker experience and thinking about how that translates to the era of digital biomarkers. I'm very proud, actually. This was the first member-initiated working group within our research committee here at DIME, and they've done an absolutely tremendous job with this work. So dial in for that if you'd care to join us and learn more about that. We also have a webinar coming up that we're very excited about. Shayla, I'm going to get her name horribly wrong, poor Shayla, Selimovic is going to be joining Rachel, actually, who's on the line today to talk about BARDA's ENACT work. So specifically how their goals around early diagnosis and early notification of illness sort of intersects with the world of digital health and what they've seen from their vantage point within HHS. So join us for that terrific conversation. And with that, I just want to thank everyone who dialed in today for this great conversation. Timo and Sara, thank you for your thought leadership on this work. Thank you for making this challenging act intelligible to us all, and for joining us today. We will be posting the slides and a video of today's conversation so that more people can benefit. And just really appreciate you both, and thank you for your hard work on this topic.
Thank you very much, and stay safe and healthy, everybody.
Thanks.
Likewise. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.